Welcome to the Cozy Convos podcast. I am your host, Elijah. And as you can see, you guys, we have a brand new episode. We are on episode 12. And I am so excited for today's topic. This is something I have been waiting to discuss for some time now. And now, while we have touched a little bit on this in episode 10, I thought it was time to bring this back around and address some other things that I did not say in that episode. Honey, let's get straight to the point. Today's topic that we will be discussing. Well, I shouldn't really phrase it that way. I just think that it's time for us to debunk the gay stereotypes.
Let's have a conversation and make it cozy. Let's dive into the unknown so we can continue growing. It won't always feel so comfortable letting go of limited beliefs, but we know we have big dreams and goals, so we're committed even when truth gets heavy. Let's have a conversation and make it cozy. Let's address the hard things and still make it feel so cozy. Let's embrace our flaws so we can feel even more cozy. This safe space won't make you feel anything other than cozy.
Now, the reason I created this video is because there is so much negative distortion surrounding queer people, especially feminine men, and then, baby, don't add the color layer on top of it. And I do want to take this time to express my stance on some old belief systems that I do feel are now outdated. And in this episode, I don't want to just address the negative distortions that other people outside of our community may have about us, but also some of the negative distortions that we have about ourselves. Now, I want everyone watching this to sit back, relax, prepare yourself, because we are about to get deep, honey. We are about to get to the foundation and the root of some things that I feel like are not talked about as much as they need to be talked about. Now, you can only suppress a group of people for so long before they begin to bite back and start asking questions. And the most common one I feel like queer people are asking is, why something that feels natural and internally liberating always the target of so much hate and discrimination? Now, being that we touched on this in episode 10, let's start with the feminine energy. As humans who've been conditioned by the school and religious structures to only believe in what our physical eyes can see, it's difficult for us to comprehend that energy is the real determining factor and foundation of who we are. As long as there are two opposing sides, masculine and feminine, well, I shouldn't really say opposing, but girl, just to give a better picture, as long as you have something on opposite sides, there's always going to be something in between, and I feel like queer people are that unspoken in between. We're so blinded by measuring the world on what's physically tangible because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught to neglect the spiritual realm that coexists with the physical one that we are currently in right now. Now, when we speak about intuition, gut feelings, those unexplainable moments of being pulled to go in a certain direction despite lacking physical evidence on why you should do so, honey, that is something extraterrestrial guiding us, something that goes beyond the physical comprehension of what the human mind normally uses to remain logical. Most of us have never been able to identify it because the system that governs us has hidden the language for us to be able to define what it is. And I feel like that's what all queer people experience, especially when we first come out. You know, honey, getting acclimated with the world that we were born into. Now, there is a large demographic of people who see feminine men and masculine women, and trans people, honey, let me throw that in there because we're all under the same umbrella, baby. In one way or another, they see us and they automatically assume that we are confused, that we are having some sort of psychological warfare due to some traumatic thing that we have experienced in our childhood. And like I said, y'all, we are getting to the root and the foundation of everything, so if this is a trigger, I do apologize, but a lot of the times, that psychological warfare is associated with us being assumed to have been, you know, the R word, been touched on and stuff like that when we were children. Yes, honey, we are going there because this is the root of everything. Now, it is important to mention that while some of us have experienced, some abuse to a certain degree, it's important to note that that was not the foundation that shaped who we were always going to become and who we are. Energy is fluid, it's universal, it exists no matter what the 3D appearance is. One type of energy does not belong to one specific group of people. And to broaden it, I do feel like we are all supposed to embody the feminine and masculine energy, just in our own unique way. Feminine men are not trying to embody womanhood and take away from the beauty that it is. Women are so special and unique, honey. Growing up, I was inspired by women more than I was so by men. I've always had female friends in the past because that's who I connected to the most. My biggest inspirations, my biggest admirations have always been women. The men, here and there sporadically. I do believe that there is a different and unacknowledged way that femininity manifests itself as. Oh, honey, that is a tongue twister. Femininity, Jesus. But I think it manifests itself as this separate, distinct group of people, which is queer men. Now, of course, y'all, I'm talking about a certain sector of queer men because every queer man is not, feminine, such as myself. But because nobody teaches society about us, including us, us. They don't teach us about ourselves. In the long lineage of queer people that existed since the beginning of time, we become targets of ignorance masked as truths that no one has ever had real concrete proof of, besides a religious structure that was tailored to serve a certain group of people. Now, I don't know about y'all, for my queer people that are watching, but me, I've always gotten it as I've grown up. Oh my gosh, y'all, I remember I was so embarrassed in 7th grade. I have this very distinct memory. I was on a school trip to New York, actually, and it was at the Apollo. And the man who was guiding us on the tour, I had my locks back then in 7th grade. I was sitting in the crowd and he was engaging with us, and when he pointed at me, well, he was like asking us a question, and he pointed at me to answer it. And he said something, ma'am, young lady, something to that extent. And I said, huh? Granted, that wasn't the first time somebody has like said, oh yeah, girl, he looks like he's gonna be gay, or he acts gay, or you know, that kind of thing. But that was the first time, I guess maybe because I had long hair, that I was ever mistaken for a woman. And I'm just saying that to say that a lot of us queer people, without us trying, we have a very distinct mannerism, style, and humor that others can often see without trying. And not to mention, I do feel like a lot of us do look androgynous to some extent. Like we're attractive and beautiful in a way that isn't completely man and isn't completely woman. Is it just me? Y'all understand what I'm saying? I just say these things to highlight that what we think is black and white does have some gray areas. Now let's shift gears a little bit, because I am so sick, I don't know about y'all, but I'm so sick of us being associated with DL men. Girl, honey, let's talk about it. Let's go there. Let's do it. Since we've just mentioned energy, not all of us are attracted to masculine and DL men. Now, there is an association with queer people and DL men due to the fact that a lot of people think we are these predatory creatures. I say this all the time, but I believe that queer people offer something unique to the world that is very healing. So the entities that want to control and govern us create so much deception so that we end up killing that part of ourselves, keeping division and separation alive. Most of us queer people have lacked the healthy parental figures in our life growing up as a child, mostly because they were not taught how to nurture and protect something that exists outside of the framework of what society is supposed to be, the traditions that have been upheld for centuries at this point. And I feel like what adds another layer on top of it is when those same parental figures, they project their fear of their true nature that they've been suppressing, and they see it in their child. And I feel like it's not discussed enough, but a lot of parents see in queer kids what they've been taught to bury within themselves. So internalized homophobia shows up as abuse. And in most households, this is the cycle that has repeated itself for generations after generations after generations. I have memories very early on when I was in preschool, before I even knew what queer was, before I even knew anything about the world. I used to be gravitated towards just playing with feminine things. I used to love playing, girl, y'all know they had the little, they weren't the Tinkerbell heels, but they were like the little glittery heels that you play with during dress-up time and preschool. I used to play with the heels. I used to play with the girl dress-up clothes. I used to put towels over my head and act like it was hair. And I remember that my parent asked my preschool teacher if I did it today. And by it, dressing feminine, playing with girl stuff. And when my teacher would say yes, I would go home and get beat with a belt. Mind y'all, I was 4 years old. I didn't know nothing about gay. I didn't know nothing about queer. I was getting my ass beat because I was just naturally drawn to feminine things. So because we experience this abuse that is framed in, I'm doing this because I love you, we believe it and start subconsciously chasing the only thing, the only form of love that we know. Because that's all we've been shown. Most of us queer men are only attracted to DL men because that's the only form of a father figure we've had growing up. Whether they were absent or whether they were present, just not emotionally available. Which is what I feel like DL men are. They are emotionally unavailable creatures. If you, a queer man, have accepted who you are, you're living in your truth, you're messing with a man that isn't, there's always going to be some level of friction and conflict within the relationship or within the connection, whatever you would like to call it, honey. DL men are emotionally unavailable and they cannot give us the love they do not yet have for the part of themselves that they keep suppressing. And in a society that continues to make us hyper aware of the association that they try to paint us in with them, like we are all this one group of people, that we're all living this same sort of life, we somehow become the villains and the targets. And some are able to accept, aren't willing actually, to accept that their favorite male figure is, suppressing his inner queen. And I do feel like when these things are brought to light, a finger has to be pointed, and it often lands on us. Or if we highlight some sketchy behavior. Now, I do want to mention, sometimes I do see that it is taken, a little bit too far. Me personally, if I see someone that is exhibiting those, DL characteristics, I'm not going to speak on it. I'm going to mind my business because that's not my lane anyway. That is not the sort of life I'm living anymore. So I'll turn my attention away and leave them to do their own thing. I don't feel that we are obligated to point out their behavior, but sometimes when it does negatively reflect the queer community and who we actually are, that's when I feel like a lot of the times we speak up and then, we receive a lot of pushback for it, for simply trying to defend our authenticity and who we actually are against this negative distortion always portrayed upon us. We are not the reason for the ever-growing DL behavior that is running rapid in the world. We are not the reason that a lot of women are living in fear right now, wondering if my man maybe has a hint of gay in him. So I mentioned all of these things, the abuse that we experience, the things that our parents do to us, to highlight where the initial attraction comes from. And I'm speaking as somebody who was strictly masculine and DL attracted as a teenager. As I did the inner work and as I reflected on why I was always attracted to those emotionally unavailable men, it's because I was sticking to what I have always known. I was sticking to the only form of love I was shown. And a lot of us gay boys, a lot of us queer people, we're doing this subconsciously, like we don't know because we don't have an example on how to be nurtured and protected in our authenticity. All we know is fight, right? We know survival. So if there's not a good foundation for us to build our connections upon, of course we're going to gravitate to the unhealed part of us that shows up and is reflected in these down low men. But now that I'm 22, honey, I can't lie. I cannot stand a DL man. Simply because their behavior reflects that emotional imbalance that I have grown tired of. One day you're into it, one day you're not. One day you're here, one day you're there, one day you know, one day you don't know. Who has time for this? Honey, dealing with DL men will have you experiencing heartbreak after heartbreak, being consistently breadcrumbed. And somehow you'll still think at the end of the day that you are the problem. And that behavior that they exude stems from the purposeful brokenness created to keep us stuck in that cycle of suppressing our true nature and our authenticity. Now, a lot of us healed gays, we have realized this to some capacity, and we know better to not go down that road because we want to build connections on a stable foundation. So please, honey, when you think of queer people, when you think of gay people, do not group us all together. Not all of us are DL, masculine trait attracted. Not all of us are looking at your boyfriends hoping that they are DL, honey. We don't all operate from that toxic, broken place. And just to kind of paint a better picture, Black women, I feel like, have a shared experience to some degree. They have a foundational understanding of what it means to be a Black woman in this world. But not all Black women get along or have the same interests. And that's the same with Hispanic people. Same with every group of race, demographic, whatever on the planet. Just because we're all queer, just because we're all gay, does not mean that we all get along. Does not mean that we all act the same, that we all have the same interests, that we all go to the same places and do the same things and have the same kind of relationships. As a queer man, I've gotten to the point in my journey where I realize that the heteronormative world that we have been conditioned to accommodate is not the only world that exists. I think it's very important for us as queer men, especially the feminine ones, honey, to take out the idea of there needing to be a female and a male figure in the connection or the relationship. Because I am very feminine, because I embrace that energy fully and unapologetically, does not mean that my partner needs to automatically be masculine. And I also think we don't really know what real masculinity looks like. So we're chasing this idea of what we're told it looks like, when in reality it probably exists in a way that we don't think it can exist in. Some would see me and think that I'm all feminine because of my voice, my physique, my appearance, and of course the aesthetic that I embody and carry. But there is a large part of me that I'm learning is very masculine. But it may not look the way that we're told masculinity should look like. Which I feel is all of us if we stop living according to who we're told we should be. Before I got to this point in my life, before I got to these realizations, I used to be very feminine, like everything about me had to be feminine. Like I embraced that energy so much and I thought that that was the complete totality of who I was, that I neglected that masculine energy that existed no matter, how I presented myself, how I felt. It was just always there. I just did not know how to embody it, being somebody that was told that I'm only this one thing. Does that make sense? Are y'all keeping up? I hope I'm not going too fast, too slow, girl, let me know. And I do hate that we don't have a lot of good representation on the complexities of who we are. And like I said earlier, yes, we do have our shared lingo, our shared characteristics that all connects us together, but that shouldn't categorize how you think about us or how you think you should speak to us. Honey, this brings up another one of my points that girl, it grinds my gears a little bit. I know people would just be trying to be nice and, accommodating, but sometimes, baby, no, it does not do it for me at all. Like, I don't like when I come across people and they automatically go into that gay demeanor and overusing the lingo. I'm just letting you know, some of us find it very cringe and we do not like it at all. It's like, how can I put it? It's like a Caucasian person putting on a black accent, if you will. Like, it's weird. It rubs me the wrong way. Like, don't try to act how you think we want you to act. Just be yourself and let us connect naturally, And another stereotype that I would like to address is this queer term that I have been using more and more often. I use queer over gay because I realize that I'm not always attracted to just the physical vessel of someone, of a man, if you will. Now, while there is that strong pull, it isn't always the case for me. And I feel like if we all kind of opened up, that would be the case for majority of us, especially in the queer community. You can be beautiful, you can have the physique and all of those kinds of things, but if the energy isn't in alignment, if the energy is not pure and expressive like mine, there's always going to be that disconnect. Which is why you'll find some queer men attracted to trans men, you'll find some queer men attracted to masculine women, because of how strongly they naturally embody that energy. Because that masculine energy, it does dominate, but there's still that softness of that feminine energy that exists there. Honey, my girls who have felt it, my girls that understand, girl, the complex things that we are discussing in this episode today, y'all know what I mean, honey. I just think with me using queer, I've gotten out of the gay thing, the physical vessel thing, the strictly men, strictly masculine, strictly, DL. And I think in more so terms of energy, not just presentation. Does that make sense? We are more complex than the world gives us credit for, and I feel like we are a lot deeper, a lot more spiritually in tune than the world gives us credit for as well. Now, while we do still have a ways to go when it comes to dissecting men and women being born with opposing energies, I think it's important for us to ask the questions, which is why I created this podcast. Because I want us to uncover the hidden truths together. I want something that I say to, trigger you all, and then something that you all may comment and say to trigger me. And to thinking about things a little bit deeper and putting two and two together, if you will. If we want change in this world, if we want change within the queer community, then we're going to have to locate what's been hindering it. And that starts with inner reflection. When you accept who you are and you embrace your authenticity, you start to notice those contradictions in society based on your own experiences. And that's what's been happening with me, honey. As I live my life, as I exist, in a crop top, in my long, beautiful, luscious lock, honey, in my feminine energy, I just see so many contradictions, just based on the type of reactions I get, how I'm received. So that's how a lot of this knowledge and awareness has come to me. Now, this brings me to a point I want to touch on briefly, but will be addressed. Will definitely be addressed in its own separate episode. As a queer boy that grew up in church trying to express himself, I experienced many attempts to beat the gay out of me or provoke me in several ways in hopes that it will go away. Or in other words, let's be real, in reality it was an attempt to teach me how to suppress my true nature so that I would live my life as a DL man using women as a cover or hurting them for the rest of my life to fit in the traditions of what the society has told us men are supposed to be. Oh honey, yes, like I said, we are going there, we are going there. And because of this, for years I denied my relationship with a higher power because I had no framework of understanding how queerness could coincide with anything divine or spiritual. My idea of spirit or God was for so long associated with the abuse I endured from the people who claimed to live in alignment with God, the people who claimed to serve God, the people that were always in the church, honey, the people that were preaching and spreading the word. It's crazy how those were the very people that drew me away instead of closer, when I thought that that's what, that's what it's supposed to be about. We're all supposed to be welcoming and embracing everybody no matter what their background is. But no, those were the people that pushed me away and made me look the opposite direction, away from God. So once I came out, I was like, I was 12 when I came out, and progressively I started to become more comfortable in my identity. I was very secure in being gay. I knew this is who I was, but I was just never comfortable having any sort of relationship with God or any association with that. And I hate that I used to say this, but I thought that I was rebelling in a way, because I used to have, those conversations with old family members and stuff like that, and they would try to talk sense into me or get through to my logistics and how I thought. And I just always used to say, well, if this part of me is a sin, then I'd rather go to hell than live my life as a lie. And of course, back then I didn't know what I knew now, but I was just so understanding of, even though I didn't have all of the frameworks for understanding why, I knew deep down on a soul level that this is who and what I have always been meant to be. And I was not going to deny that or suppress it because all of y'all are telling me not to do it. And I think, oh girl, I think it's a very tricky thing for, us that are breaking generational curses, us that are living a life that we're told is wrong, being the only one to stand in your truth while everybody else is running from theirs. I think that takes a lot of bravery and courage because a lot of us experience that. Everyone that's been conditioned by the old ways, by the traditional ways, they stay stuck in that box. And when you step outside of that box, it can be very isolating. It can be very lonely because you're following your soul, you're following what your heart knows instead of the words of everybody that is around you. And this may be a little bit off topic, but girl, when you think about it, this is very slavery, which has suppressed our group of people, because I feel like, girl, queerness in the Black community is such a broad topic, something completely separate that I think we do need to dissect too. Oh girl. And y'all know what they say, there's no hate like Christian love. Because the first abuse I experienced, it wasn't from school, it wasn't from anybody else, it was within the home. It was within the people that were so-called God-fearing. So with that abuse being a consistent theme within my life, within my childhood, of course that creates cognitive dissonance in how I view God. I was never taught or shown that I could be two opposing things, supposedly opposing things, at once. But as I've stepped more so into who I am, honey, I don't read the Bible, I don't go to church, I don't do any of that. I connect with God one-on-one in my own personal way. And through that, I have awakened to the fact that I am a queer, divine, spiritual being. And with that being said, it is my belief that being queer is not a sin. And I want to highlight this point because even if you don't believe in God, that religious foundation is why a lot of people still view us as sinful and wrong. Or why a lot of people, they have those feelings, those desires, and they suppress them. They're like, oh no, that's wrong. And it's because of this false foundation that religion has been built upon. I believe that queer people are put on this earth designed to do something specific that no other group can do or replicate. I do believe that we are the intermediaries to the opposing energies. And a part of our duty on this earth is to mediate with whatever gifts the universe gives us. And I feel like my gifts is music, this podcast, speaking to people, my vlogs, just enjoying life, living in my authenticity. I feel like we each have a role that is supposed to contribute to the collective society's well-being. In the same way a queer man cannot replicate or recreate the divine gifts a woman possesses, the same way a woman can't replicate the sort of energy that a queer man has. I feel like we need to be more respectful of each other's roles in society and start thinking and educating ourselves on why we are actually here and why were we created the way that we are. Not in the ways that school and churches always taught us to be, but in the way that nature ordained. If more people reflected on the types of things I'm sharing with you all in this video today, we'll start to finally awaken to the truth, finally seeing how vital and necessary queer people are to the culture. Oftentimes, we're not given credit for our influence in fashion, in music, and entertainment, which is intentional. A lot of what we see in today's mainstream media were inspired by, or taken without credit from queer people. For example, ballroom music and the lingo, honey was tea, no shade, the dance moves that everybody loves so much, that has been incorporated into so much choreography that I see now. Your favorite artists or public figures most likely have a queer man, beating their face, doing their hair, styling their clothes. So as much as society wants to erase us, it cannot be denied that something we possess is critical to humanity, or else we would not be sought out in these spaces we've always been in. Even if the man on your team wasn't out, he probably, was stirring with that inner queen, which is why you look as beautiful as you do. Honey, let me just give this disclaimer, because I know, people can be sensitive. I'm not saying that we, are taking all the credit for why people look a certain way, why people look, presentable, but I will say that it is a very common thing for queer men to be the backbone that other artists' foundation is built upon when it comes to either their look, their creative direction. Honey, I'm just saying what's going on, honey, no shame. You also have to ask, though, how does it benefit someone who purposely tries to erase us and our history and the queer culture that has changed the world in more ways than we consciously know? Why is it so important for certain labels to permanently stick when the world thinks about anything queer, gay, trans, or LGBTQ+? Ask yourself, who benefits from this? Who benefits from us being seen in this predatory light, like we're these sick creatures, like we need to be gotten rid of? Who does this serve? Who does this really benefit? It's not benefiting the everyday person, people who are living, going on about their day, working. What system? Who at the top does it benefit? Now lastly, I do feel like this stereotype is the most harmful. When it comes to queer people, especially feminine men, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't believe that a queer man can be pushed around or bullied without repercussions. If you are confused and uncomfortable with how somebody else expresses themselves, it is not your place to express that outwardly. I know a lot of my gays, especially my feminine ones, can relate to being underestimated, and people feel like we're an easy target to be their punching bag. But baby, it is 2026, and the world does not know. Most of us have had to fight silent battles internally and externally all of our life. And through all of that, there is this survival, this fire that is created. Now, you won't find that every queer man has had that experience, but me, honey. A lot of us that grew up, that were in a lot of, hood environments, ghetto environments, if you will. I don't want to, girl, I don't want to say that, but honey, girl, just to be real, a lot of us who come from the slums or have been around people like that, we have endured a lot of things that we do not discuss. So when we go out into the world, independently, and we are healed and aware, we stop allowing ourselves to be doormats. Nobody is asking for acceptance or understanding of our existence. We're just simply asking for respect as a person, as a human, and if that's too difficult of a task, leave us alone and walk away, turn the other way. Because I know me, if I don't agree with something, if something makes me uncomfortable, I'm not going to try to go after that person or harm them or spew out any sort of hatred. I'm going to turn the other cheek, I'm going to turn the other way and go on about my business and tune out that thing that I don't like. And that is what we ask. If you don't like it, then just leave us alone. Find something that you do like. Most of us understand minding our business on a deep, fundamental level. We just wish everybody else understood that as well. When you don't like something or agree with something, you don't need to make your stance known, because a stranger's life and what they're doing should never directly affect you. So honey, let's all be adults and mind our own business. And I mention this point not to create any sort of conflict or friction, or to glorify violence or anything like that. I'm just simply wanting to bring awareness to this, because a lot of people do see us and they have this automatic idea in their mind that we won't stand up for ourselves. But honey, you never know what a queer person is going through, because that gay boy that has been bullied all of his life and went through some traumatic shit that almost took him out, he might be the bear that you poke a little too hard and will have your life flashing before your eyes. This is me. I'm just speaking from somebody who's been a target and almost had to hurt some people for provoking me. So I just think that it is in everybody's best interest to leave queer people alone, because all we want to do is exist and mind our business. Baby, it is not the 80s, it is not the 90s, it is not the 2000s anymore. Hate crimes against queer people are not as easy to get away with in this generation, honey. We are not the ones. I'm trying to let y'all know, this generation of queer people, especially us that have grown up in, those environments, those rough environments, baby, we are not the generation that I think you want to be, trying to take out your projections and your fear and everything else that you may be wrestling with internally out on, honey. So like I said, this video is pretty much to bring awareness to a lot of the stereotypes that exist that are very much so false. It may exist for some people, but everybody is not like that, especially within the queer community. But I do hope you guys enjoyed this beautiful, beautiful episode. Comment down below, let me know what you thought about the things that we discussed in today's video, the points that were made. And I cannot wait to see you guys in the next episode of the Cozy Convos podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my other channel. And don't forget to subscribe to this one and click that notification bell so that you don't miss a brand new episode when it comes out, honey. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next episode of the Cozy Convos podcast. Kisses, hugs, and many, many blessings. Mwah.